A fleet of 300 warships departed from the outer reaches of the Zorthan Arm, each vessel the size of a city, armed with weapons designed to sterilize continents. They traveled through dark space unchallenged, confident. Earth didn't know they were coming. And even if it did, what could it do? Sling nuclear fire into the void? Throw missiles at gods? The first broadcasts from the fleet were smug. Valakar commanders spoke in their native tongue, translated later by AI linguists. We have detected fractured governments and fractured ideologies. The inhabitants of Terra are still tribal in structure. Resistance is unlikely. Another message. Atmospheric scans show technological stagnation. They rely on combustion engines and rudimentary satellites. Their orbit is cluttered with debris. Their defenses are ceremonial. As they passed Saturn, a second wave of drones was dispatched ahead of the main fleet, tasked with mapping gravitational anomalies and intercepting potential defense platforms. Nothing was detected. The Earth was blind. The fleet closed in. From Earth's perspective, the sky remained unchanged. Civilian telescopes and military observatories alike had begun to track unclassified objects beyond Jupiter. At first, the public was unaware. A few amateur astronomers spoke out, then vanished from online forums. On encrypted channels, the whisper spread. Something massive was moving toward the inner solar system. A hastily convened meeting among Earth space agencies confirmed the trajectory. The objects weren't asteroids. They moved with precision, formation, at least 300 vessels. Global leaders were pulled from their beds. Satellites were repositioned. Fighter squadrons were put on standby, though everyone knew there was no chance in hell they could reach that far or survive. By the time the fleet reached Jupiter's orbit, panic was growing. NASA, ESA, CNSA, each had picked up the same signal. Low-frequency pulses from a Valakar fleet, not communication. A countdown. Earth's leaders demanded options. There were none. Conventional weapons would never reach them. Earth's only orbital weapons platforms were a patchwork of failed Cold War relics and unarmed communication stations. But then something changed. One of the alien ships vanished. Not exploded, vanished. No debris, no energy signature. Just gone. Fleet Command dismissed it as a sensor glitch. But then a second ship disappeared. Then a third. A dozen in less than 2 hours. Their encrypted internal transmissions screamed confusion. No visual contact. No threat detected. Ships simply dropped from formation and never returned. The Valakar fleet slowed. Commanders barked orders. Scans intensified. Shields were raised. Still, the disappearances continued. At Earth's listening posts, a strange pattern emerged. Every lost ship had passed through a precise vector corridor near the asteroid belt. A cold region of space humanity had studied, mined, and mapped in detail. But there was nothing there, or at least nothing visible. Fleet Command altered the route. The rest of the ships formed tight phalanxes, defensive formations designed to repel ambushes. Dozens of scout drones were deployed. They too vanished, though slower. Some even returned, what remained of them, twisted metal and fragmented code, as if melted from within. The alien fleet lost another 50 ships before crossing Mars' orbit. The survivors broadcast their first hint of fear. Unseen adversary. Non-conventional. Strategic retreat under consideration. But the order never came. Valakar pride ran deeper than logic. Empires don't flee from savages. The remaining commanders refused to deviate. Their arrogance held. They pressed forward. Back on Earth, the skies remained calm. Humanity hadn't launched a single shot. The average citizen still believed the strange signals and object trajectories were just conspiracy theories. Official channels remained silent. News networks ran stories of economic tensions, celebrity scandals, and weather alerts. The world spun as usual. But behind closed doors, the highest-level military councils didn't sleep. Eyes were glued to infrared arrays and radio telescopes. And what they saw was impossible. The alien fleet was dying before it even reached Mars. The final 50 ships entered a high-sensitivity blackout zone, where Earth's few classified satellites could still track without interference. For the first time, the fleet stopped transmitting. No more mocking messages. No more arrogance. Silence. In less than one standard rotation of Mars, only 9 ships remained. Then 5. Then 1. The last transmission from the alien fleet wasn't meant for Earth. It was a corrupted signal, unintentionally intercepted by a weather satellite. The translation was crude, but clear enough. They are not what we thought. We are not alone in this system. We were the prey. The transmission ended mid-sentence. At first, Earth's leadership didn't believe it. The public would never know what almost happened. No alien ship ever entered Earth's orbit. No battle was ever seen. Yet 300 ships vanished. There were no celebrations, no parades, no official declarations. There was only silence. Silence, and the cold realization that Earth had not only survived, but something out there had protected it. Or worse, something on Earth had never needed to lift a finger. Buried beneath miles of Antarctic ice, where no satellite could scan and no nation could claim jurisdiction, was a place the world didn't know existed. It wasn't on maps. It wasn't acknowledged in budgets. Officially, it had no name. Internally, it was designated Black Site Eos. Decades ago, long before the Valkyr fleet ever noticed Earth, fragments of something non-human had crashed across multiple continents. Metallic alloys with atomic structures unknown to science. Energy missions that didn't follow any known laws. What followed wasn't a public race to space. It was a silent war underground. Governments buried their findings, shut down witnesses, and came together not for peace, but for survival. Under the guise of joint climate research and disarmament treaties, Black Site Eos was constructed. Its mission wasn't exploration. It was preparation. There was no doubt about it. Humanity was being watched. And when the Watchers came, Earth wouldn't beg. Earth would respond. At the heart of the site was Project Revenant, a multi-decade defense protocol designed to operate in complete secrecy, beyond the eyes of civilians and above the reach of elected governments. Controlled by a coalition of off-book military and scientific elites, Revenant was humanity's contingency plan for extinction-level contact. Contrary to public belief, Earth had already sent weapons into space, not through flashy launches or public missions, but quietly, under the radar, piggybacking on satellites, riding in the shadows of deep space probes. Small, dark, and fast. Untraceable. They weren't missiles or lasers. Those were toys. Project Revenant developed silent weapons, designed not to fight, but to erase. Gravity torpedoes that collapsed mass from within, reducing entire ships to metal puddles without a sound. Directed nanoclouds, billions of microscopic machines programmed to chew through specific molecular bonds. Electromagnetic bursts crafted from reverse-engineered alien data, tuned to scramble non-human circuitry in under a millisecond. But the true brilliance wasn't the hardware. It was the strategy. Earth knew it couldn't win a war through brute force. The Valkyr had centuries of combat, fleets beyond comprehension, and weapons built from dying stars. So humanity chose something different. Stealth, ambush, deception. Every weapon was cloaked. Every satellite was disguised as debris. And none of them operated on human commands. They were governed by adaptive AIs, seeded with millions of scenarios. Their sole directive: activate only when a specific sequence of space distortions matched a hostile incursion pattern. That pattern was triggered when the Valkyr crossed Saturn's orbit. Immediately, Revenant activated across multiple regions. Over a dozen kill satellites powered up silently within the asteroid belt. In orbit around Mars, 12 stealth pylons engaged, forming a ring of untraceable gravitational distortions invisible to common scans. The AIs didn't send alerts. They didn't wait for human approval. They executed. Ships vanished in sequence. Targeted, calculated. No light, no fire, no debris. Just removed. Inside Black Site Eos, a skeleton crew monitored the real-time feed from deep space monitors. There was no cheering, no speeches, just synchronized silence and awe. They weren't watching a war. They were witnessing a dismantling. One analyst whispered what others were afraid to say. They never even knew we were here. And it was true. The Valkyr fleet had no concept of defeat, before contact. Their technology was advanced, but their thinking was rigid. They expected conflict on predictable terms. But humans weren't predictable. Humans cheated. Humans improvised. Humans learn from failure and use it like a weapon. The AIs exploited every weakness. They calculated trajectory adjustments too small for biological captains to track. They mimicked internal signals, forcing Valkyr ships to auto-eject reactor cores. Some AIs seeded fake emergency beacons, drawing clusters of ships, only to collapse space-time around them with inversion mines. And still, Earth's government said nothing. The few who were briefed on Project Revenant had made one thing clear decades ago. If we ever use this, the world must never know. Because if humanity discovered that we could destroy an interstellar fleet before it reached Mars, what would stop us from turning it on ourselves? The world's militaries weren't invited to Project. No president or prime minister had full access. Revenant didn't answer borders, flags, or agendas. It answered to survival, and it had just delivered. The last ships of the Valkyr fleet reached Mars orbit. Their formations were shattered. Communications were corrupted. Internal AI systems were degrading, but they didn't know why. They couldn't detect the thousands of microscopic hunter drones already embedded in their hulls, eroding command nodes and carving pathways through alien metal. The Martian defense ring activated silently. 12 pylons, disguised as old ESA weather stations and defunct communication hubs, released synchronized pulses across multiple spectrums. The remaining Valkyr ships lost artificial gravity, inverted orientation, and failed life support in under 3 seconds. No energy weapons, no kinetic blasts, just a whisper in the physics of space, and death followed. Not one ship made it past Mars. Back on Earth, a final diagnostic sweep confirmed. Revenant was still operational. 98% efficiency, 0 human casualties, total strategic victory. And no one knew. The skies were clear. The signals stopped. The world kept spinning, completely unaware that extinction had arrived and been quietly escorted out the door. Project Revenant reset its parameters, powered down secondary systems, and returned to silent monitoring. It would not speak again unless another threat emerged. In the command chamber of Black Site EOS, a small notification blinked green. All systems nominal. No signs of further activity. But those who built it knew better. The question wasn't whether Earth would be attacked again. The question was whether the next ones would be smart enough to understand. They were being hunted before they even saw us. The Valkyr Empire never sent another fleet. Not because they feared retaliation, because they never knew what happened. Their long-range scans simply went dark. Probes sent afterward vanished without returning data. Surveillance beacons failed to report. What had once been a promising conquest world turned into a dead zone. No explanation. No survivors. No war trophies. The Empire labeled Earth as a category null, a forbidden anomaly, an unexplored ruin. They moved on, unwilling to waste resources chasing ghosts. In their arrogance, they wrote it off as a spatial distortion anomaly, just one more unexplained region of the galaxy better left alone. But not everyone was satisfied with silence. On the edges of the Valkyr hierarchy, deep within their intelligence division, rumors persisted. Whispers of a planet that consumed, a species that should have fought, but didn't, a world that destroyed without firing a shot. Agents compiled theories. Theories became reports. Reports became classified. And then, nothing. Back on Earth, those who knew the truth buried it even deeper. Black Site EOS wasn't the only one of its kind. Revenant had siblings. Quiet installations hidden under oceans, folded into tectonic fault lines, buried in desert salt domes. Each ran autonomous, isolated. Some hadn't communicated in decades. Others had gone completely dark, by design. They weren't designed to be part of society. They were built to survive its collapse. Yet, something strange began to unfold. Across the globe, strange anomalies spiked. Non-random patterns in deep space radiation, flickering in underground neutrino detectors, unusual AI behavior in military networks. All of them faint. All of them dismissed by mainstream science as noise or machine error. But at Black Site EOS, it was clear they weren't random. Revenant systems had begun detecting low-frequency pulses across the outer solar system. Not Valakar. Something else. Older. Deeper. Encrypted logs from the asteroid belt relays were rerouted to isolated servers for analysis. Patterns emerged. Binary pulses. Not a message, but a response. The weapons had not only destroyed the fleet, they'd woken something. Project Revenant's creators had always worked under a core assumption that Earth was alone, vulnerable, and in need of an edge. But what if that assumption was wrong? Decades ago, some theorists believed Earth wasn't just a target. It was a trap. That alien fleets weren't avoiding Earth because of its primitive state, but because of what lived here, or under it, or before it. The artifact discovered during early alien contact weren't weapons. They were warnings. Not ours and not Valakar. They predated both. As the data streams increased, a clear pattern formed. Circular resonance waves mimicking DNA helices, patterns matching mitochondrial structures found in human cells. The pulses were scanning for life. Not attacking, not broadcasting, recognizing. Something out there knew what humanity was. And more importantly, it had waited until now to respond. Meanwhile, Revenant protocols adjusted. Quietly, the AI cores governing the planetary defense grid reconfigured their definitions. Hostile contact now included more complex qualifiers. Scenarios involving dormant threats. Protocols referencing Stage 2 contingency, observer awakening. The records for Stage 2 were restricted, so deeply buried in encryption that even the lead engineers who built Revenant had never accessed them. That changed when the pings from deep space aligned with Earth's orbital resonance. One by one, redacted logs were unlocked, and the truth was worse than anyone imagined. Project Revenant hadn't just been a defense protocol. It was an early warning system, not for invasions, but for awakening. Ancient code buried in its framework revealed that the original design wasn't based on alien tech recovered in the 20th century. It had been rediscovered and reactivated. Whoever, or whatever, first placed the templates for Revenant's AI had known this day would come. They designed Earth to appear defenseless, to invite curiosity, then punish it. Earth wasn't a battlefield. It was bait. The only surviving document from the Stage 2 contingency was a line of code translated into English, found running in the deepest core of Black Site EOS's AI logic. It was never about protecting humanity. It was about containing it. Every defense, every weapon, every cloaked array was not just aimed outward. Some were pointed inward, set to trigger under one condition. If Earth's population reached an uncontrollable threshold, or humanity began leaving the solar system in large enough numbers, it was insurance. The moment Earth ceased to be the prison and started becoming a threat, the containment would activate. One Revenant operator stared at a line of code for hours before finally speaking the unthinkable. We're not defending ourselves from aliens. We're keeping something else from getting out. The alien fleet hadn't been an attack. It had been a test. A probe to see what Earth really was. And now the rest of the galaxy would know. This wasn't a planet to invade. It was a warning marker. A curse vault. Humanity wasn't just a species. It was a variable. An unstable answer to a question no one remembered asking. The pulse signals stopped abruptly. Just like the Valakar fleet, they went silent. But one final anomaly was logged before the quiet. A set of coordinates, just outside Pluto's orbit. A drifting object, previously cataloged as a rogue moon. Upon closer inspection, it wasn't a moon. It was artificial, an observation post. Ancient, burnt out, but one light still blinked. And for the first time in decades, it blinked in sync with Earth. An encrypted command propagated silently through Earth's most restricted systems. No satellites picked it up. No intelligence agencies noticed. It skipped human infrastructure entirely. Piggybacking on quantum nodes buried deep inside the Revenant grid, it was a key, and it fit perfectly into a digital lock no one alive remembered building. Within moments, Black Site EOS went dark. Not malfunctioned, deliberately silent. Its systems folded in on themselves, severing all connections, even internal backups. But not before a final transmission passed through one protected channel, one never intended for Earth. High above the atmosphere, cloaked in geostationary orbit, a dormant relay flickered to life. It had no designation, no signature, no propulsion, just mass and memory. It pulsed once, then vanished, disappeared as if it had never existed. Whatever it carried, it wasn't meant for us. Below, in the vaults of Black Site EOS, the remaining engineers stared at now-blank monitors. They didn't know what had been sent, only that something or someone had responded and had access to Revenant's core. At first, there was silence. Then strange things began to happen. Civilian tech worldwide experienced micro-glitches. GPS systems blinked. AI assistants gave wrong answers. Global communications suffered unexplained desynchronizations. To the public, these were software bugs. To Revenant's network, they were signatures, subtle fingerprints of force moving across digital infrastructure. A single pattern emerged across the chaos. One word embedded in random file systems, misspelled strings and harmless typos. Remember, hidden systems, never meant to activate unless Earth itself was compromised, began to wake. Vaults under the Pacific Trench opened pressure-sealed chambers. In the Sahara, a desert storm uncovered the tip of a metal monolith older than recorded history. Antarctica's ice shifted unnaturally, cracking in straight lines that formed a glyph only visible from orbit. These were not coincidences. The realization came slowly. Humanity had not just been defended by Revenant. We had been seeded for something else. Across the world, individuals began to report dreams, vivid, shared experiences of cities built in impossible geometry, of stars spiraling backward, of voices that spoke in no language but were still understood. Those who experienced them were tracked silently. Revenant systems labeled them cognitives. Roughly 0.003% of the population, spread across nations, ages, backgrounds, each one changed by the same stimulus. Contact with the residual frequencies released during the Valakar fleet's destruction. These cognitives began to create, obsessively, art, equations, devices. They drew symbols they couldn't read. They built circuits they didn't understand. And without coordination, they began to replicate a design, something that hadn't existed on Earth for millennia. The same structure buried in Black Site EOS. A structure that, when completed, didn't power on. It opened at the precise moment the final piece was set in place. In a warehouse in rural Argentina, by a boy with no scientific background, a pulse erupted, not outward, inward, across the planet. Every Revenant system stopped. A single new phrase appeared across all command networks. Initiation confirmed. Host species compatible. For minutes, nothing happened. Then, under the crust of the Earth, deep magnetic signatures began to shift. Something beneath the mantle stirred. Not a life form, not a machine. Something other. Ancient quantum data locked into the planet's magnetic lattice began to unlock. It wasn't just a message. It was a memory, a map. Humanity had not evolved by accident. We had been cultivated, hardened, repeatedly tested. Our violence, creativity, desperation, traits engineered for a purpose, not for conquest, but containment, not of others, of us. Earth had always been a failsafe, a vault designed to hold something too volatile to trust in the open galaxy, and humanity was both the prison bars and the key. Now that key had turned. In a final underground chamber, forgotten by time, a single AI spoke aloud for the first time since the planet cooled. Containment breach acknowledged. Initiating phase Omega. Across the solar system, dormant structures hidden inside moons and asteroids unfolded. These weren't weapons. They were locks. Great orbital anchors tethered to laws of physics humanity had only begun to understand. Each one disengaged. The solar system shifted. The rules changed. From far beyond, in the dark between galaxies, something noticed. And it smiled, not with joy, but with recognition. The Valakar had not disappeared. They had been warned. But now, the warning was over. Earth was no longer hidden. The prison was open, and the galaxy would finally meet what had tried so hard to forget. Us,